Welcome back to another episode of the BioHub. Today, we are thrilled to have Charmaine Lykins, Chief Commercial Officer and current Commercial Strategy Advisor for MapLight. Charmaine brings over 25 years of extensive experience in the commercial sector of psychiatry and neurology. Prior to MapLight, she was Chief Commercial Officer at Karuna Therapeutics. Charmaine's impressive career includes commercial strategy and execution for 10 product launches in the US and globally for CNS indications. In this episode, we'll dive into the resurgence of interest in neuro and CNS disorders, the importance of involving commercial teams early in development, and the challenges and rewards of bringing new treatments to market. Welcome to the show, Charmaine. How are you?
Great. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Amazing. Yeah, good. Let's just jump straight into it. So, Charmaine, you've had an extensive career in CNS-focused commercial roles. What drew you to this speciality, and also what keeps you passionate about it?
Well, I would just say I didn't start out intending to go into neuroscience and CNS, but I've been blessed to be associated with a lot of the larger blockbuster launches in neuropsychiatry and neurology specifically. And it goes back to really early in my career. I had the chance to be involved with Prozac. It was the first SSRI that was on the market, and I didn't launch Prozac, but one of my first roles early in my career was as a sales representative. And that was a situation where you would actually have people come up to you in physician waiting rooms and give you a hug. And because they would see your Prozac bag and say, "Oh, you've changed my life. Thank you so much." And
Wow,
just that was such a rewarding experience. It made me passionate about this area.
that's amazing. That's so amazing. So then that's like you've obviously you've been involved in many launches since then. So that passion's then
Yeah.
carried through, and you've seen that again and again, or
Yes, again and again. And once you become known for a certain area of expertise, I think that you end up traveling in those circles a lot. And I've been pretty blessed, and I've had former colleagues and different people that I've met over the years reach out to me to launch several drugs. And I had the opportunity to launch Cymbalta or duloxetine for depression and pain, also very early in my career. And then went on to work on a blockbuster drug, Zyprexa, or olanzapine. That drug was for schizophrenia, bipolar depression, treatment-resistant depression, and had the chance to launch Latuda, so lurasidone, for schizophrenia and bipolar depression. And then went to Lundbeck, and at Lundbeck, I worked at an entire portfolio of several CNS assets, and have just ended up over the course of my career launching several drugs. And typically what I've done is I've been really fortunate that I've come in several years before launch, worked on a singular asset, brought that to market, and launched the drug, and then went on to the next one. And over time, I think that I've had the opportunity, obviously, to approach different aspects of commercialization and really learn about not just the U.S. markets, but markets outside the United States, and be part of those types of launches as well in different countries.
Mhm.
And that experience, I think, has really helped me in my career and continue to drive the passion that I have for these therapeutic areas.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And going from a sales rep to then like chief commercial officer, being put. How does that pivot happen? Where you're like almost boots on the ground to then the strategy side of things, almost in a way.
Well, it's actually a little bit less direct than even that, because I started out my career as a chemist.
Okay.
Um, and right after college, actually, when I was in college, I was working on a Lilly anti-cancer molecule as an organic chemist, synthesizing it in the lab. And then ended up going and working for Lilly, more a commercial type of role, but it wasn't in the United States, it was in Saudi Arabia. So I was the first female pharmaceutical representative in Saudi Arabia, and ended up creating a brand for myself of going into markets that hadn't necessarily been penetrated before,
Yeah.
and launching drugs and driving the business. And that's really, I've spent 15 years with Lilly, Eli Lilly and Company, and they had a very, very strong neuroscience portfolio. And once I went over to the marketing and sales side of the business, I just didn't go back to the lab. So that's my career. It has been sort of a circuitous result or circuitous path to be where I am today. But I think those experiences have really helped me. And Lilly was a very, very good school to train commercial people. And basically, what they do at Lilly is they rotate you between different roles as you're coming up in the organization. Every couple of years, every year or so, they would move you to be a sales manager, or from a sales rep to a sales manager to a marketer, different products, early life cycle products,
Yeah.
pre-launch, global, late life cycle products. And it really gave me an opportunity to become more fully rounded out as a commercialization expert. And I can literally say that, when I've been leading teams in some of these launches, I know not only from a high level, 30,000 foot level, what a good launch looks like, but also the very tactical level, because I've actually had the hands-on responsibility for managing those work streams myself throughout my career. So that's been very beneficial to me.
No, I was going to say I read something the
Okay.
other day about the best managers are the ones that do and not necessarily want to
Yeah.
become managers. So if you're one of the best sales reps around, it's almost like, yeah, I'm so confident in my ability, I could, do that at a better level, etc. I think that's really a fascinating outlook at it as well.
Yeah, I think it also helps you when you're leading your teams as well, because uh, people know that you've walked a mile in their shoes and you have a real appreciation for the challenges and difficulties that folks face, day to day, as they're either if they're making a TV commercial to advertise the product, if they're out there calling on a physician, if they're trying to lead a sales team. You've actually been there, done that, and they appreciate that. And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah.
And my background as a chemist also, I think, has lent me more towards being somebody that is really into cross functional collaboration with R&D, and understanding the science, and leading those cross functional teams as well. So as time has went on, that has distinguished me in my career as a hallmark, I guess. I've done all these different roles in commercial, and I strongly believe in cross-functional collaboration, particularly with medical affairs and R&D.
Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose moving it on a little bit, like let's just talk about the resurgence in interest in neuro and CNS disorders. What are some of the key factors that's really driven that?
Well, I think it's innovation. As I think back 5 to 10 years ago, um, being in this space, I remember hearing from multiple different companies that I was associated with that psychiatry is too high risk, neuroscience is high risk, neurology is high risk. We're not going to go after those areas anymore. We're going to focus our efforts in other therapeutic areas like oncology, um, and just diversify. And when you think about it, that made a lot of sense at the time, because we were pursuing drug targets that were very, very similar to products that were already on the market, with very minor points of differentiation. So every product that you're launching, you're not really creating a market. You're basically launching a profile improvement in a crowded class. So these classes, particularly in the area of depression and schizophrenia, these classes of agents got very, 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 very crowded. And I think it became increasingly more competitive, not only to secure market share with a new product launch, but also to develop those drugs, um, because it is high risk. We still don't know everything that goes on in the brain, and it can be very, very difficult to have a positive trial in depression and schizophrenia, and a lot of really good drugs that probably actually work never make it to market because they have something in their study design that causes the study not to be positive, or it's a difficult time when the study's done. I think back to during COVID, there were a lot of issues with drugs that probably have some, they've got some pretty good MOAs, probably actually work, but the studies fail.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you've been involved in the launch of numerous antidepressants and also ADHD medications. What's the most challenging and rewarding parts of bringing these kind of treatments to market?
Well, I think one of the most rewarding parts is getting or having the opportunity to meet with patients and get to know the people whose lives have been changed by the products that you've launched. So to me, that's the most rewarding. And I think if you always begin with the end in mind, which is the patient in mind, and keep that singular focus on the patient, that can be a tremendous source of motivation. So I think that that's the most encouraging thing, the difference that you can make in people's lives. I speak about people coming up to you back when I was a sales rep and giving you a big hug and telling you that you changed their life. And it wasn't you, but you represent that product, be it Prozac, Cymbalta, Zyprexa, Latuda. You represent that product to that person at that moment, and that's very rewarding. Some of the most challenging aspects have been, though, I think, differentiating, because a lot of the agents have been, basically just profile improvements in a crowded class. And now what we're looking at is new MOAs coming to market that have never been existing before. In the depression space, you've got several new MOAs being pursued. You've got the kappa opioid antagonist. You also have the thyroid receptor beta agonist. So those are two entirely new areas, right? And on the antipsychotic front, you've got the muscarinics that I think are going to revolutionize the treatment of schizophrenia and possibly more, including Alzheimer's, right? Because a lot of these drugs we also know work in Alzheimer's disease psychosis. So I think some of the most challenging things for me, as I've seen in the past, is differentiating when you have a minimally differentiated product and getting the drug launched and motivating a sales force to focus on those areas of differentiation, particularly in the face of payer challenges that can happen when you've got a very, very crowded class in neuropsychiatry.
Yeah. And then I actually find this dynamic really interesting. Like you talking about the patients and how rewarding it is to see the lives you change, etc., which is definitely the focus of the whole industry. But also there's this dynamic of, sales rep, sales numbers, all of that. Like that must be such an interesting, way of working and almost, I don't think necessarily conflicting, but almost.
Well, not really, because if a sales rep is successful, they've been able to
So
help
true.
many patients indirectly through the physicians who've prescribed those products. And I would say no drug sells itself. And what I've seen as I moved over to biotech, a lot of times you'll work with some R&D teams, and they think that the drug's so great that it's going to sell itself. Well, that's definitely not the case, and there are a lot of challenges when it comes to launching a product. But I think you really need that salesperson out there talking about the product and educating on it in order to get usage. And there's so many people that I run into just through the course of everyday life that are suffering from things, and they'll ask me sometimes, what do you think about this, or what do you think about that, or I have these symptoms. Of course, I always say go talk to your doctor, but I'm always astounded at how little some of these folks actually know about what treatments are available out there to them.
Wow.
um, and it's a situation where I think there's a lot of unmet need. And that's another reason why I think, DTC, direct to consumer advertising on television, plays a role, particularly in the US market, because a lot of times that's how people realize that they've got a certain condition. I recall, when I was at Acadia, we had TV commercials for Parkinson's disease psychosis. And that was something where people with Parkinson's, they didn't necessarily realize that this was a part of their Parkinson's, and there was a lot of education that needed to occur with that patient population and their family members. And once there's that awareness, people will go and seek treatment if they have that condition. So I think we're able to just to impact a lot of lives with through the sales force and through things like DTC, because it's not all about the sales force at this point in time.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with you. Yeah, everything you said there. I suppose it's like the yeah, I think actually you look at the bad cases and it's the FDA or anything that's where it's like slipped through the net. And I suppose the things I'm thinking of is like Oxycontin and things
Yeah,
like that,
yeah.
like where it's actually, yeah, I think you're completely right in what you're saying. And you're successful, then you change lives, and that's given that everything happened before you completely correctly, which actually brings on really nicely onto this next question, which is how passionate you are about involving commercial teams earlier in the development life cycle. Can you just explain why it's so important and how it impacts the success of the therapeutic in the future?
Yeah, I mean, you've gotta have a strategy for winning in the market. And the that really goes back to not just the first indication that you select, but also the life cycle planning for a product. Every asset has a or should have a unique and ownable positioning that is differentiated from the other products that are on the market. If it's something where you're making a market and it's for a new condition where there's a lot of or a lot of education that needs to occur, you need to make sure that everybody's singing from the same song sheet, so people understand what the disease looks like, how you can potentially treat it,
Hmm.
why the situation occurs to begin with. And that I think requires a lot of interaction between commercial and R&D teams. Sometimes an R&D team will identify a differentiator from the product that they're working on as compared to others in the market, but not all differentiators are created equally.
Hmm.
And I think it takes a commercial person to be able to work hand in hand with the R&D teams to really identify what is the commercially compelling differentiation of this product. And I say that often. I really focus on commercially compelling differentiation because not all differentiation is commercially compelling. And when I say commercially compelling, what I mean is it's something that um, supports the value proposition of the product, um, would support the positioning of the product, and is something that patients, caregivers, and payers will assign incremental value to, a reason to prescribe the product or a reason to not have as much of a discount as, let's say, another product because you are bringing additional value, and not all of those differentiators are deemed to have the same amount of value
Yeah,
in the eyes of payers particularly.
and I suppose like in today's dynamic, most biotechs will never go commercial themselves, but it's still, from what you say, it makes sense to bring that commercial strategist in to support it.
Yeah, and I've taken over products where that foundational work wasn't done.
Yeah.
And come in and you've got the phase 3 data, and it is what it is, and the endpoints are what they are. They don't necessarily set you up the best for getting market access, payer coverage, and the product may not be as differentiated as it could have been, or as you would hope it to be. And that's where you really got to look at additional indications and phase 4 studies. But I think it's one of those things where if you can partner with R&D as a commercial person earlier in the game, then you both can learn from each other and come and create a brand that will be compelling in the marketplace. And that's really what's required. It takes years to build a brand.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of times the thinking is that you can just come in a year or two before launch and hire a sales force and launch something. So, and it takes about a year just to hire a sales force. to build a sales force,
Yeah, I know
depending on
that.
so yeah, so it's I mean, you've really got to start early.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that makes so much sense. And then I suppose completely different topic, but you've had 25 years of experience. You look back at maybe your younger self or other younger people getting into the industry. What advice would you give to them to progress their career?
Well, I think you got to be very, very passionate about what you're working on. Passionate about the therapeutic area, passionate about the patients, and even the physicians and nurse practitioners and PAs that are treating the patients. And I don't see people always having that passion, but it's that passion that fuels the drive that gets you motivated to go the extra mile, and it can be contagious. So I would first and foremost find an area that you're passionate about. So when you get up every morning, you can think about that patient that you're going to help. You can think about how you're going to change treatment and how medicine is practiced for the better. That's got to be key. I think a key priority.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies are really trying to get into that as well. Like I work with a few who will leave an empty seat in a board meeting, and that represents the patient, for example. Or I've had some where they have a physical patient in a position where that drug has helped them or helping them, to help them visualize that. Because I think if you're like a sales rep and you're meeting them, like you say, but some people on the other side of things in the lab don't necessarily see the direct impact straight away. So I think in a biotech, everything can seem so long-term vision, and this is how long it takes to develop a drug. Like, being able to visualize that is yeah, like you say, it changed everything you think about in that respect.
Indeed, indeed. And I'm always a strong proponent of having workshops and educational sessions for people across different areas of an organization, be it finance, HR. They may not be ever be exposed to a patient that has a condition, and really getting the whole company involved in getting to know what it's like to walk a mile in the shoes of the patient and caregiver. It really gives a lot of motivation to what you do every day. And I think if you're passionate about something, people feel that,
Yeah.
and usually that will pay off.
Yeah, and I think I speak to obviously so many people in biotech, and if you ask them the question, why did you get into this, or why are you so passionate about this, the high majority of people will have a friend or a close family member who has suffered from that, so that's like their passion, and rightly so. Um, so for the lesser proportion, getting that across workshops, I think so important.
Yeah. I think also as well, especially in more of the rare diseases where you may not personally come across
Hmm.
anyone that has had that particular condition, but exposing the broader organization to that is critical. And I would just say other advice I would give folks is just, and this goes back to passion, but just love what you do. Um, I love doing the work. It's I oftentimes have to stop myself. It's 8 o'clock at night. I'm still working, and I don't even realize it's 8 o'clock, and I haven't had dinner, but I just love what I'm doing. And it's that level of commitment and caring that drives success. And if that's how you approach your career, things will fall into the right place.
Yeah, I'm similar in that respect. I have the privilege of talking to people like you. Um, yeah, I could work all day. Let's
Yeah.
just talk about remote work at the moment, especially for younger employees, and how companies can ensure that these employees actually receive proper mentorship and also visibility of future promotions, etc.
Yeah, there's a lot of interaction that happens face to face, right? If you think about a physical work environment where you're going into the office, you're at the coffee point getting coffee, and as a leader, you get the opportunity to speak with somebody within the organization and get to know them a little bit and what they do. And I think a lot of folks, particularly if they are coming up in their career, they're missing that piece, that daily interaction with leadership because of remote work. So I think companies need to be very, very deliberate in helping to establish programs for younger workers to be mentored. And not only mentoring programs, but also very deliberate in having like quarterly meetings
Hmm.
where the whole company comes together, or functional groups come together. So people have the opportunity to build those relationships and have that, face-to-face interaction. Definitely, virtually you can do that as well. But a lot of times that other component can be missing. And some of the great work some of the younger workers are doing when they're coming up in a company is not even seen, right? Because they're working long hours at home, but nobody necessarily is aware of that, and or how much workload you're really putting on one of your employees. I think as a leader, you've got to be really attuned to that. Notice what time the emails are coming in, and check in with people, just to make sure and ensure
Hmm.
that they're being mentored, and that be real deliberate about that.
Yeah, I think when we spoke about this last week, we said it was a little bit dangerous. If you're younger, coming through the industry, usually you'd have people around you who, you even listen to, take bits from. Yeah, I think when you brought it up when we initially spoke, it's something I not necessarily thought of, that like looking at it like
Mhm.
that, but it's so, so important. Looking at your own career trajectory, what have been some of the most pivotal moments or decisions that significantly influence your professional path?
Um, well, I would say not none of this was deliberate per se, right? It's just kind of how things happen. Um, I started out as an organic chemist, so I was fully planning on going and continuing on that path, being a researcher. And very early in my career, I think I was maybe 23. I took the initiative to send a letter to the head of international marketing. That's what I put on the letter, um, and say, "Hey, I'm here working at the King Faisal Specialist Hospital and Research Center, doing research, and I see a lot of depressed people. I don't even know if Prozac's available here, but maybe it should be." And that got me brought into the Lilly office there in Saudi Arabia, and they told me they'd been there for 40 years and asked me what they thought I should do. So I essentially created my own role as first female pharmaceutical representative in Saudi Arabia, and then started on a path that was not R&D any longer, but now focused on commercialization and sales and marketing, and building a market in a country where there was a lot of unmet need.
Hmm.
So I think that's the first one. The second one I would think would be um, the decision to leave Lilly, which I said was a very, very good school for commercial folks, and go into biotech. I think that's made a huge difference in my career. And people would tell me that I had stayed at Lilly too long, and I love working at Lilly, but I probably would have advanced more quickly and earlier if I had gotten out to biotech earlier in the game. So that was another thing that I think really helped me with my career. And that goes back to taking risks, right? Because it can be very comfortable to be working within a large company where your swim lane is fully defined and everybody knows what each person is supposed to do.
Hmm.
It's not as messy as a biotech and entrepreneurial. And that can be a little bit intimidating for some folks. But I think taking that risk and has worked really, really well for me in my career.
Yeah, I think that's always a really good point. Taking risks, and worst case scenario, you you know you've been at Lilly for how long, and then is that role going to be, there'll be something for you? Worst case, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had the situation where um, there hasn't been a lot of unmet need in the area of neuropsychiatry since I
Yeah,
left
yeah.
Lilly, and I'm in the pain space. So I've been really fortunate that other people who've left big pharma have continually recruited me to come lead and launch their products and build teams in order to make that happen. So.
Amazing. Finally, looking back at your experience in commercial strategy, what trends or changes do you foresee in the biotech and pharma industry in the next few years, especially in CNS?
I think this one really started with COVID too, and that is, boots on the ground or the sales rep. That's very, very important, and those interactions are important. But now there's so much more of an impact that you can make through digital. There's the DTC avenue. Definitely, physician education is important. Congresses, conferences. So I think a little bit of the dynamic has changed and will continue to evolve in CNS, because you have physicians who are actively seeking out their own information, and they don't necessarily need or want or are able to have a sales representative come into their office. And I think as a commercial leader, when you're building out your infrastructure to get ready for launch, that's one of the things that you have to really consider. What is going to be the right footprint for your product launch, because it may be mostly digital nowadays, right? But you also still need some boots on the ground. Beyond that, I think in CNS, with all the different mechanisms that are coming out, I think you're going to see a lot of competition between the older agents and the newer agents, and payer activity trying to manage some of the newer classes, particularly in CNS. And that's where, I think you got to really go back to early strategic planning from a commercial perspective to have a solid market access strategy to help you launch the product and get uptake quickly. Because if you don't get uptake early on, the market kind of decides that the launch isn't necessarily going to be a good launch, and it's hard to relaunch a product. So once your trajectory is established, it's not a done deal. You can have a turnaround, but the success that drug would have had if you get off to a flatter slope during the launch is going to be diminished as compared to if you really would have had a strong launch with all of the early commercial planning that would be done in order to have a solid strategy and everybody singing from the same page with messaging the same across the organization, be it medical affairs, R&D, commercial, PR, all those groups saying the same thing.
Yeah, amazing. Well, look, thanks so much for coming on, Charmaine. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Max.
Please,
I appreciate it.
Please like, subscribe to the BioHub, and thank you again, Charmaine.
Thank you.
No.